Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It's a great, wonderful, emotional time for me to say welcome, velkommen, tack så mycket, and thank you for coming to the wonderful celebration, the 90th anniversary of Grace Lutheran University Church. What a wonderful weekend we've had. It's just great to see you. Do not look dismal. This is from the 3rd chapter of Matthew. And I think we ought to give thanks very early in this evening. I am just bringing a greeting, but I am especially thankful that we are not, at this very moment, seated in the basement of Grace University Lutheran Church. We've come a long way in 90 years, haven't we? And we don't have all the Marthas of the church, like Birgit and Gloria and Pearl and V and Kitty and Judy and all the others that work running around serving us, and all the Marys like me sitting out in the other room. So it's wonderful we're here. And I like to start life and every morning with something very, very positive. So I will tell you what I do, and especially in honor of the fact that I joined this church with my parents, Edward and Hilda Olson, in 1935, almost 60 years ago. And so in honor of all those ages, I look in the mirror every morning and I will tell you what I say, and then I would like to have you look at the person next to you, and we will repeat this to start this joyous occasion. We want to be upbeat, positive. Every morning I look in the mirror and I say, I am becoming physically more attractive with each passing year. Now I'd like to have you look at each other, and I will say the words, and we'll all say it with some feeling, please. All right? Pick your partner. I am becoming physically more attractive with each passing year. Thank you. Now those of you who are Lutheran can also add, this is most certainly true. Well, I hope you will notice that this is the national dress of Sweden. You will notice that it's a little bit updated since you looked at these dresses years ago, and I was recently in Sweden, also Finland and Norway, and I did pick up this new national dress. It's still rather conservative, high neck, long sleeve, but it has a little more zip than some of the older ones, doesn't it? I went to Sweden to prepare for this big event because I had reason to believe that I was indeed the rightful heir to the throne of Sweden. And the reason I thought this is that in my youthful days, my Swedish mother, when I got a little bit uppity, she would always say to me, "Who do you think you are, the Queen of Sweden?" So I thought there was some message there, and I wanted to go and check it out. But I don't know how you feel about trips. I've been back now for about a month, and I'm sorry to say that no one, friends, relatives, distant people, have never asked me about the trip. You come back and they say, "Oh, I see you're back." And then you might add, "Yes, I've been to Sweden, Norway, and Russia." And they say, "Oh, I see." And you know, they don't see anything when they say. So I did find a way out for the rest of you people who need to talk about the trip. I went down to Dayton's store recently, and I went to the fur department where I knew they would not be busy. And I found a very fine Christian young man there, and I said to him rather casually, I've just come back from Sweden. And he said, oh, I see. And then I said, would you care to hear about the trip? And he said he'd almost gone on a trip once, and he listened for up to 5 minutes, so I was very pleased. Well, it's wonderful to see you. You know, as we had a wonderful, wonderful meeting last night, all kinds of memories about what Grace Church has meant to us over some 90 years. It was really wonderful. And I like to, I wish I could say things as well as my dear friend Albert Schweitzer, who commented on his life when he looked back and began to think about what people had meant to him. And he said something like this: when I look back on my youthful days, and I think of all the people who gave something to me, or who were something to me, often without knowing it, people with whom I perhaps never exchanged a word, but heard only by report, entered my life and became a living presence within it. Much that I could not otherwise have done or felt so deeply came about because of what these people gave to me in the significant hours of my life. And I think we all live spiritually by what people have given us in the truly significant moments of our life. Qualities like patience, grace under stress, love, kindness, patience, we have learned from people like all of us that I see before me today, and what I've learned from so many of you. I often think that if we had everyone before us who has entered our life and who has meant something to us and could tell them what had passed over from their life into ours, they would really be amazed to know how the exchange had been. And this is what Grace Church has meant to me over some 60 years. Thank you so much, and we're going to have another wonderful morning. And it gives me now great pleasure to turn over the program to the chairperson, the chair mammal, the chair mammal of the 90th anniversary program of Grace University Lutheran Church. And this is a young woman who has energy and stamina and tremendous organizational skills. And Maureen Stelz, we're thank you and your committee 1,000 times. Maureen?
Thank you, Marilyn, for your wonderful words in getting us started here today. I put a lot of thought into how to follow Marilyn because that's not always easy to do. And I thought I could try a humorous remark, and then I realized that I come from a German, Irish, Catholic background, and trying humor on Swedish Lutherans probably wouldn't be a good idea. So instead I'm going to tell you quickly how I came to be standing here today. I began coming to Grace in 1980 when I was a student at the University of Minnesota, and I lived in Comstock Hall. And the girls on my floor kept inviting me to ride the church bus that came by every Sunday morning and picked up students to go to, I think it was a Baptist church. And I had been putting them off, and a friend invited me to come to Grace one Sunday. This is someone I had met at freshman orientation. And I came. And the girls I lived with on my dorm floor thought it was a little strange that I was going to that radical little church by the University Hospital. But I came and I stayed. I was married at Grace. I've had my 3 children baptized at Grace, and Grace has become my church home. And it's a wonderful place to call home. My task today is going to be to move us through the program at a reasonable pace. So at this time, I'll call on Pastor Hawkinson, and he will lead us in an invocation.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we thank you for the capacity of memory, for thinking back through all the moments that gave us insight, a touch of truth, and a touch of beauty. And God, when we come together like this, we trust those high moments, those moments that come to us sometimes in the deepest gloom, the deepest despair of the world and our own lives. But we remember the one who said, "Be of good cheer, I've overcome the world." And we've had the privilege of being together this morning and being together here at the meal. And I'm reminded of what the disciples said. We knew him in the breaking of the bread. And now we are breaking bread together. Some have meat but cannot eat. Some can eat but have no meat. We have meat and we can eat. Thanks be to God.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor Hawkinson. Over the course of this weekend, we have heard many different stories of the history of Grace, and they are all from different perspectives, and they've all been wonderful to hear. At this time, I'm going to call on Bjorn Bjornsson, who is going to give us a brief history of Grace. Okay, ready? There we go.
Mina damer och herrar, I could continue in Swedish, but I don't think my wife would appreciate it, since I am only Swedish by marriage. I appear on this program not by popular demand, but in response to a request that I discuss Grace Church history. I was told that I could talk for not more than 3 minutes. That gives me 1 minute for every 30 years. In this allotted time, I can only offer you trivia. For those who are interested in our church history, I suggest you read the historical sketch that has been presented to you. While I am almost as old as Grace Church, my association with it did not begin until in the early 30s, when I was a student at the university. At that time, I joined the Lutheran League, an organization intended to serve university students. As I recall, attendance at our meetings rarely exceeded a half dozen, and we seemed to spend all of our time trying to find out how we could increase the membership. Sometimes we succeeded in increasing it by 100%, and we had a full dozen people present. As all of you should be aware, Grace Church was born Swedish, and Swedish was the dominant language for nearly 25 years. An unbroken line of Swedish pastors served our congregation until in 1985, when a not-so-melancholy Dane, Reverend Verlin Smith, became our pastor. This year, the congregation called a husband-wife team both of whom are of Norwegian background. Calling these two non-Swedish pastors should not be interpreted as indicating that it takes two Norwegians to equal one Swede. I'm sure that most of you feel that Grace Church is a majestic and beautiful building, but beauty is in the eye of the beholder. A visitor to Grace told a member, "You're going to have a beautiful church here when it's finished." Our congregation's use of the present church began in the basement. The first service was held on December 24th, 1916, when there was only a partly finished basement in which to meet. After nearly a year of gathering in the basement, church services were moved upstairs, and the church was dedicated on December 9th, 1917, at Swedish services held in the morning and a special English service at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Somewhere along the way, we seem to have lost our basement. At least in some recent announcements about church events, we have read that they would be held in the fellowship hall, whatever that might be. Calling it fellowship hall is apparently an effort to lend dignity and class to our friendly old basement. I'm all for calling a spade and a basement a basement. I refuse to recognize fellowship hall. Continue my recitation of things that don't appear in any history of Grace Church. We have doubled the number of communion services with the addition of one that gives us an assembly line service. Two new contemporary liturgies have been introduced, in one of which we are invited to a hungry feast, whatever in the world that could be. But I have expended my allotted time, which should please you all, I'm sure. But after all, we have come here for a luncheon to enjoy a feast that I hope will not leave us hungry.
Well, at this time, we'll begin that feast, and our Radisson people will begin serving the luncheon. Enjoy. For sale. And we haven't worked out the details of that yet, but we will be taking orders over at church. We're going to take a minute and change a couple things around, and then we'll get started again here. And have come to grace through different sets of circumstances, we share many commonalities. At this time, we'll recognize those relationships that bind us together, as well as key groups of individuals in the life of grace. We're going to begin with membership, and I'll ask those members who have been asked to help with this to come forward at this time. We're going to be recognizing membership by decade. So when your decade is introduced, we'll ask you to stand. You can come up on stage here. It'll be Steve, and then so we'll start with Steve here, and then you can kind of line up to the left.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Steve Wilson. My wife and I have been members at Grace since 1991.
They can't hear you.
We've been members since 1991. My name is Steve Wilson, and Jolene is around here somewhere. Anyway, I'd like to welcome anybody that joined in the 90s to stand and be recognized.
I'm a little closer to the mic. My name is Julie Ackhartz, and Tom and I joined in 1985, and I'd like to have all those who joined in the 1980s to stand up with me.
In 1975, my husband John and I sent our 17-year-old off to the university instead of going to her senior year in high school. And her first Sunday, she made her way to Grace. Subsequently, she found her husband in the Grace Choir that day and brought her parents also home to Grace. I'd like the 1970s members, please, to stand up.
Hi, my name is Judy Stutman, and our family joined Grace in the 1960s. And I'd like all the families who joined Grace in 1960 to stand up.
My name is Dolores Peterson. It was late 1950s when we were members of a large downtown church, and we were living up in Prospect Park, came down to Grace Lutheran, and that was it. I'd like everyone who joined in the 50s to please stand.
I'm Pearl Winters, and I joined in about 1944. Will those who joined in 1944 stand? 40. In the 40s.
I joined the church in 1935 under the name of Marilyn Olson, and my grandfather had changed his name from Olaf Olson to Olaf Schoneson. I'll never forgive him for that, but it's a nice name. But I'd like everybody who joined in the 30s to stand, please.
I don't have a representative from the 1920s, but I believe there may be people here who joined in the 1920s, so please rise at this time to be recognized. That's nearly 70 years of membership, and that's remarkable. And let's check. There may be at least one person here that joined before 1920. If you joined Grace before 1920, please rise at this time. Anybody? Well, well, I think the membership we have is remarkable, and it's really neat to see all these years put together here. Next, we're going to recognize people that have been baptized at Grace. In baptism, we become brothers and sisters in Christ, and I'd ask those that were baptized at Grace to stand at this time. In confirmation, we make a formal commitment to our faith and to live out that faith in our daily lives. I invite you to stand at this time if you were confirmed at Grace. Many of us began to attend Grace during our college years. I invite you to stand at this time if you are presently a student or if you came to Grace as a student. For some of us, work at the university hospitals or the hospital stay of ourself or a family member has brought us to Grace. If you come to Grace from the hospital community, please stand at this time. Grace has served as the setting for many wedding services, small and large. If you were married at Grace, please stand at this time. Each fall, members of Grace undertake the responsibility of teaching our faith to our children. Because of the commitment of these individuals, our Sunday school is a welcoming and nurturing place. If you have taught Sunday school at Grace, I invite you to stand at this time. Likewise, for many of us, our first experiences at Grace have been as children. If you have attended Sunday school at Grace, please stand at this time. Conducting the business of a congregation is both a rewarding and challenging undertaking. It requires one to focus on the mission of the church in all decision-making, large and small. It requires patience and the ability to respect differing opinions and personalities. Our church council members have guided Grace through 9 decades of often difficult decision-making, and we are thankful for their continuing dedication to Grace. If you are currently a church council member or have served on the council in the past, I invite you to stand at this time and be recognized. It is through the work of our committees that the mission of Grace comes to life. There are presently approximately 11 active committees at Grace. There may be 12, I'm not sure. If you have served as a committee chair, please stand at this time and stay standing for a moment. And then, now I'd invite all who have served as committee members to stand as well. We've got more than that, I know. There are members of Grace who, for reasons of health or mobility, are unable to join us on a regular basis for Sunday worship, nor can they participate in the many activities of the congregation. Our shut-in members are a valued part of our community. We are very, very glad that some of you have been able to join us today. And we want you to know that we hold you in our thoughts and our prayers when you cannot be with us. Let's just recognize our shut-in members. At Grace, we have been blessed with courageous individuals, knowledgeable in such matters as plumbing, parking lots, word processing, bulk mailing, snow removal, and how to offer help to visitors and members with highly varied needs. If Grace were an automobile, our parish assistants would be the gasoline. Without them, we would not get very far. I invite those of you here who have served Grace as parish assistants to please stand at this time. In calling our pastors to grace, we have also welcomed their families. And in the process of accepting the call, this is often meant for us that these families have uprooted from their communities and friends and moved to a new city. Our pastors' families probably have a little more public attention within the congregation than our families in general, and we appreciate their patience with this. We have also had the great opportunity to share in their triumphs and their heartbreaks. And I'd invite members of our pastors' families to stand at this time.
No hidden secret.
At this time, I'm going to call on Tom Ackhartz, who will be presenting to our pastors.
I was afraid she had taken my speech there. We are fortunate today to have with us 6 pastors who have served Grace. These people can be described in many ways. They are pastor, teacher, friend, confidant, and comforter, to name a few. In calling us to live our lives according to the teachings of Christ, they have shared with us their joys, their disappointments, their wisdom, and their love. We are thankful for the gifts they have given our community. We extend to you our sincerest love and appreciation. Could I have the Reverend James Claypool come forward, please? The Reverend James P. Claypool accepted a call to grace in August 1946 and served until January 1955, when he became Director of World Relief in Korea. Pastor Claypool, thank you for your years of service to Grace and for your gift of ministering to the community.
Thank you very much.
Could I ask Reverend Vincent L. Hawkinson to come forward, please?
I need help, Vince.
The Reverend Vincent L. Hawkinson accepted a call to grace in late 1955 and served as full-time pastor until 1985, at which time he was honored as Pastor Emeritus. Pastor Hawkinson, thank you for your years of service to Grace, for your gift of compassion, and for challenging all of us to be instruments of peace and justice.
God bless you.
The Reverend Verlin O. Smith accepted a call to grace in 1985 and served until July 1992. I would like to ask Verlin to come forward, please. And I have written here Pastor Smith, but to me he's always Verlin. Verlin, thank you for your years of service to Grace, for bringing your campus ministry experience to Grace, and for continuing to be a voice for peace and justice. The Reverend Robert Bow accepted a call to serve as interim pastor of Grace in July 1992. Bob, can you come forward? Pastor Bao, thank you for your service to Grace during this recent time of transition and for all those who you visited and comforted. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to call Pastor Dan Garnis and the Reverend Mary Halverson to come forward, please.
I've lost my wife.
Okay. Well, we'll pretend that she is here. She is here in spirit. The Reverend Mary Halverson accepted a call to serve as co-pastor of Grace in May 1993. Pastor Halverson, thank you for coming to Grace and bringing with you your caring and enthusiasm, especially for the ministry to children, and I suspect that's where she may be right now. We look forward to our coming years together. The Reverend Dan Garnis accepted a call to serve as co-pastor of Grace in May 1993. Pastor Garnis, thank you for coming to Grace and bringing your gift for teaching the gospel through the stories of God's people. We look forward to our coming years together. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel very fortunate to introduce to you the men and women who have served this congregation for over 90 years. Now we will take 15 seconds for a photo opportunity, and then I have a speech.
Good afternoon. Before we render this dramatic entertainment, I want you to know that all the facts are untrue unless they are true, and all the jokes are intended. It is now my pleasure to introduce a few of the past pastors of Grace. They are, of course, facsimiles, not carbon copies. Our first pastor, Dr. John Tillene. And I think Dr. Tillene was wondering whether God was going to speak in Swedish or English this particular Sunday. Dr. C.A. Wendell. Let us reason together in God's Word. Pastor Claypool. Let us build up the household of faith. Pastor Vince Hawkinson. Peace and justice for all. Pastor Verlin O. Smith. God's message of comfort is for everyone. Pastor Bob, let us do this dramatically. Thank you, guys. We'll see you later. (1903), a new century, Victorian principles, many new immigrants, language barriers, the old world and the new world clash, but in Minneapolis, a small group of people gather to worship. Oh, hello there. We weren't expecting all of you at Our Ladies' Aid Society, but I'm sure we'll have plenty of refreshments. This is Our Ladies' Aid Society at Sharon Church, October 3rd, 1904. Please join us for devotions.
Som du har lärt henne välja och förlöna oss vad vi tror
The 1920s began with pseudo-optimism, rapid change, changing mores, and ended with collapse and despair. Where is Nancy? Okay, easy here. When the women of during World War I gave up steel from their corsets enough to make 2 battleships, they not only gave up the steel for their corsets, but they freed up their flesh and they freed up their mores, and here they are. I'm not sure that Nancy would have been welcome at Sharon's Ladies' Aid. This is a Sunday school, and they came in a little different. We didn't have a practice, but I want you to know that these 2 girls are from 1903. This girl's dress was made by a 9-year-old in 1925. Willie's costume was made in 1931, and Siri and Julia represent the 1940s, and Laura represents the 1990s. And I wonder now if our current Sunday school teacher, Nancy Boom Boom Boom, would lead them in Jesus Loves Me. Amidst all the turmoil in each and every decade, Grace Church has been here to serve us and to sustain us in both happy and sad times. Indeed, the whole family rejoices when a new child is born and baptized. I would like to present to you Krista and Sam, one of the newer members of our church. I would like to present to you this girl for confirmation. She is wearing Pearl Hawkinson's dress that Pearl's mother made in 1924. And now may I have the 1990s confirmation class. Where is she? My godchild, Kirsten. Confirmation then, confirmation now. Thank you, guys. Joan. You know, you learn something from children all the time, and not long ago, one of my Sunday school kids said, "Mom, I swear on the whole Bible, the Old Intestine and the New Intestine." Vince tells the story of the day when he had acolytes at Grace. We're probably going to have them again now. We have enough kids to have them. But there were these 2 little guys, and they had their white robes on, and they had extinguished the Advent wreath candles, and then they looked up, and lo and behold, the gate was in the altar railing. And so they huddled together a minute, and they got up speed, and they jumped over the altar rail with the robes flying, and then very seriously put out the candles on the altar. Okay, the 1930s. The crash, homelessness, hunger, helplessness, but at Grace, the door was always open for help, comfort, and fellowship. This often included the famous Lutheran potlucks, and Pearl Winters would always bring her spinach souffle.
Oh, I'm so excited. I have a new
Now the wedding march going. The 1940s. This is the decade of Pearl Harbor, the Great War, VJ Day, and countless weddings. We had a parish worker once who was going to be married at our church, and the last week when she typed out the bulletin for the day, the postlude was supposed to be the Passion Motet, and we all got the giggles when we sat down and we read the postlude was the Passion Motel. This is Margaret, and this dress was on our 75th anniversary. This is Lucille Stellarit's mother's dress from 1911. And this is Letty in Birgit Bjornsson's dress from 1945. She was married in Sweden, married to Bjorn, and Sweden in 1945, and then their daughter wore it in 1973. This is Jean Hawkinson, and I'm amazed at this. This is a dress she wore in the 1940s, and she's the bridesmaid for June and Doug. June Peterson and Doug Kalin were married at Grace Church in 1940. April, I think it was. June's dress, that's June's dress. And coming up behind it is Pastor Mary. I kept running around church last week saying, I need your body. I had clothes for certain bodies. And Pastor Mary was the only body that fits Louise Rehnquist going away suit from her wedding to Harold in 1951. Now, that is really very special, this array of people. But now I would like you to listen very carefully to a piece that I read in the Grace Messenger from 1917. The first event at Grace Church was the marriage of Miss Signe Svensson to Mr. Philip Sodergren. Because the church was not quite furnished yet, the happy couple borrowed light fixtures and seats and other necessities and had 150 guests to their wedding. It was a delightful day. 1 year later, seldom are sunshine and shadow so beautifully mingled as they were here. The first funeral was full of pathetic charm. A year ago, the first wedding took place in our beautiful sanctuary, and Signe was the bride. Now the first funeral in the same beautiful sanctuary, and Signe is no longer with us. Recessional. In the 1950s, when you think of that decade, you think of growth, optimism, faith in the future, and those baby boomers just kept on coming, and ever increasing numbers. It's now February 1956, and Vincent Hawkinson has accepted the call to Grace Church. We look in on the Hawkinsons on their first Sunday morning. This is very authentic clothing because Gloria gave me this dress to use, and she wore it that first Sunday. Don't they look lovely?
Now, Liz, before we get started, remember this is our first Sunday here. Please don't make them mad already.
You just stay further. You stay. The 60s. Michael Rowe. The 1960s are seared in our memories for many, many reasons. Civil rights, the Kennedy assassinations, protest, Kent State, flower children, and the relaxed style of dressing. Vince was just getting in a role that never seemed to end. He alone just stay still, just for a minute. Yeah, just stay still. No music for a minute. As I was saying, Vince was just getting on a roll that never seemed to end. And it was protest after protest after protest. And I'm really sorry to say that the thing that I loved the most that I printed was a big pink thing that said, "Peace and justice for all except those who park illegally in the parking lot." And then it's death. Okay, Vince, do you want to lead them out? Okay. Peace now, peace now, peace now, peace now, peace now. The 1970s. One decade ends with much tumult and shouting, only to bleed over into the 1970s. There's a story that goes around at Grace, and Pearl wasn't sure it was true, but that one day a young woman came to Grace Church with a see-through blouse on and no bra, and came up and talked to Pearl, and she just talked to her like, everything was just fine. So the woman's protest was a little throated at that point. But then, this is what's supposed to have happened at another ELCA church, or it was only LCA church then on the north side. This woman came to communion with her coat, or came to church with her coat on. When they offered communion, she took off her coat. She had absolutely no clothes on. She walked up to communion. They served her communion. She had to walk back, and nothing happened. Those people did not blink their eyes. Unrest, protest, and polyester clothing, the years of wash and wear. Do you have Anders back there, Here we have that wonderful polyester clothing. It's wonderful. And at Grace Church, Anders was always there to greet us. I've lost Anders. I don't know where he is. Oh, here he is. Here's Anders.
Welcome. Welcome.
Why don't you come over here to tell your joke? Come over here to tell your joke.
Anders always told stories, and I remember one where he was telling somebody about this person who had lost their memory. And so she was so happy that she had found this particular advertisement regarding it. So he said, "Well, where is the advertisement?" She says, "I have forgotten." A typical Anders story.
For those of you who might be strangers, you guys, you may go now. We're through with the 70s. I started coming to Grace Church with my husband Clary in the 70s, and in fact, we joined church. We came about 6 years, and one week Vince called me up and he said, "Say, Kitty, you wouldn't like to join church, would you?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. We got to think about it." And the next Sunday, as soon as he saw me, he pounced at me and said, "I didn't put too much pressure on, did I?" He was really afraid. When we finally did decide to join, we joined with Peter McGraw, and that particular Sunday, it was a spring Sunday, and until just recently, Bill Wallace, I think, has corrected it, but when we have a deluge of rain, we have that one corner of the basement that just floods, and so there was Vince, and the new members were there, and quickly he says, here's a mop it up, mop it up, mop it up, and afterwards, Peter McGraw said, "Is that some kind of a rite of baptism for Lutheranism?" Anyhow, Anders was priceless. By the time we joined, his jokes were maybe a little more homespun, and I remember that for like 2.5 years he asked us if we were new members and if we lived in St. Paul or Minneapolis. The 1980s. There was mourning by some at Grace at the dawn of the new era. The mourning in America, the leverage buyouts, the Persian Gulf, the me generation, empty optimism. We were sad. But two shining stars appeared. Verlin O. Smith, the champion of all people, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of causes. And we heard them all, Verlin.
Good morning, boys and girls. This morning's children's sermon, I thought we would discuss the theology of Martin Buber.
I'm glad you laughed at that. That was my line. Okay. And our second star was Marilyn Boom Boom Belgum. You can use the mic.
You know, I was born in antiquity.
No, iniquity.
Iniquity. Iniquity. I knew I was going to mess it up.
She doesn't know the word.
Okay. Second take.
We'll start over again. Okay?
Iniquity.
Okay.
I was born in iniquity.
That's right.
And in sin did my mother conceive me.
What a joyful comedian. No wonder she belongs to Grace. She needs all she can get. And now you go over here. Music for her.
A Lutheran striptease.
Come out. Enough, Joan. She's out. She's gone. She's out. Marilyn told us last night that her her Swedish mother had cautioned her to be quiet and chaste. But in the sunset of her life, something happened. The 1990s, a search for a new ethic for a new century. And Verlin did it. He said he would retire when he was 65 years old, and he did. So we called Pastor Bob as our interim pastor. Pastor Bob, here he comes. And I knew that we had a gem. During Bible school, our first Bible school in 20 years, he came in on his first day, and he stopped and he talked to every single kid. And we loved him. And he also was very dramatic. One day he laid down. The kids were around like this, and he was a good shepherd, keeping them in the fold. And then he told his story kind of like this. Thank you, Scott. Well, when you have an interim, it means you have a call committee. So this is how it worked at Grace. The church council called a pre-call committee. Then the pre-call committee called a call committee.